I had to rehearse that and then go back and work with Gloria Loring and a thing, then run home and put some monologue together.
Bob Hope died with a vault next to his office that no one could enter, not his family, not his friends, just him and his most trusted assistant. Inside were millions of documents dating back to 1938. When experts examined it, they discovered Hope's comedy wasn't spontaneous. It was a massive operation, like a secret CIA of humor. Presidents begged him for certain jokes, the military edited his scripts, and one folder, simply marked 1968, contained material so controversial it's still sealed today. You would be shocked to know the full content of that vault. Bob Hope came into the world as Leslie Towns Hope on May 29, 1903, in a small town called Eltham. His father worked as a stonemason while his mother was a concert singer. They didn't have much, but they had music, hard work, and a little boy with a spark. London back then was still adjusting after Queen Victoria's death. The streets were quiet in Eltham, but even then, young Leslie was full of energy. He never forgot where he came from. Even after becoming a star, he returned to Eltham in 1985 to see a plaque honoring his birthplace. That small corner of England never left his heart. When he was just 4 years old, in 1908, the family packed up and moved to the United States. They landed in Cleveland, Ohio, hoping for a better life. It was a city full of factories, smoke, and noise. Work was tough to find. Leslie's father struggled as a stonemason. His mother helped out by singing at small venues. Money was tight. Life wasn't easy. But Leslie watched, listened, and learned. He saw how laughter could lift people, even for a moment. That lesson stuck with him. Later, during the Great Depression, the family faced the threat of being sent back to England. But by then, Leslie's talent had started to shine, and his rise in entertainment helped them stay. They had come too far to give up now. By age 10 in 1913, Leslie entered a local contest. It wasn't just any contest, it was a Charlie Chaplin look-alike contest. Chaplin was just becoming a star, and Leslie nailed the performance. He studied Chaplin's movements, the little walk, the funny mustache, and the cane. Then he put on a show and won. It may have been a small event, but it was a big moment for him. The applause was real. The attention felt good. He didn't win a fortune, probably just a small prize, but that taste of performance, of being the one who made people laugh, would stay with him forever. By the time he turned 16, around 1919, life forced him to grow up fast. The war was over, and the Spanish flu had just swept through. There was no time to dream. He dropped out of high school to help support his family. He sold newspapers. He worked at soda counters. He sold shoes. He did anything he could to help. Each job taught him something: how to talk to people, how to keep moving even when it was hard. His humor got sharper. His timing better. He wasn't reading books anymore, but he was learning more than ever. It wasn't school, but it was real education. In the early 1920s, he gave boxing a try. He even had a name for the ring, Packy East. It sounds tough, and he was. He fought 4 times and won 3. Not bad for a guy who would one day make jokes about war, presidents, and Hollywood. But boxing wasn't his future. In one match, he got knocked out. Instead of being angry or embarrassed, he laughed it off. He joked that the punch sent him straight to dance school, and that's where he went next. Bob Hope didn't start in the spotlight. In the early 1920s, he was just one half of a vaudeville duo called Two Diamonds in the Rough. His partner was George Byrne, and their act was a mix of dance and comedy. The name said it all: they were rough around the edges. Hope wasn't yet the smooth, fast-talking comedian the world would later know. He was a dancer, grinding through small-town theaters for low pay and tough crowds. Vaudeville wasn't easy. You had to win people over fast or get booed off the stage. Hope learned how to think on his feet, adjust his performance mid-act, and read an audience like a book. That's where his instincts were sharpened, on the road, under pressure, with no safety net. Years later, he would say this was where the real Bob Hope was born. By 1927, Hope had made it to Broadway, sort of. He got a tiny role in a musical called The Sidewalks of New York. No one noticed him, but he didn't care. He was on a real New York stage. The next year, he landed another small part in UPS A Daisy. It wasn't stardom, but it was progress. Then he took a shot at Hollywood. He did a screening test for a big studio. It was a disaster. Executives said his voice was too high and his face didn't suit the screen. He was crushed. That kind of rejection could have ended everything. But Hope didn't quit. He went back to theater, determined to improve. Years later, it would seem almost unbelievable that Hollywood once turned him down, but in those early days he wasn't ready, and he knew it. Everything changed in 1933. That year, Hope landed the role of Huckleberry Haynes in the Broadway musical Roberta. It was a breakthrough. The show was set in the stylish world of Paris fashion, and Hope played a wisecracking orchestra leader. His timing was perfect, his jokes landed, audiences roared. The show ran for over 250 performances. It launched him into the spotlight and caught the attention of Hollywood producers. This role showed what Hope could do when given the right material. He wasn't just funny, he was magnetic. The songs were a hit, the reviews were glowing, and suddenly Bob Hope wasn't an underdog anymore. He was a rising star. Not all of his big moments were planned. One night in Newcastle, Indiana, Hope had to make announcements between acts during a small show. He got bored and started mocking the announcements, adding his own jokes in a fake serious voice. The audience loved it. That silly improv became something bigger. It turned into a monologue style that would define his career. Hope began to craft these rapid-fire smart-aleck speeches that made people feel like he was talking directly to them. This off-the-cuff moment sparked a whole new direction. That voice, half insider, half clown, became his trademark for the next 5 decades. But behind the laughs, there was chaos in his personal life. On January 25, 1933, Hope married Grace Lees Troxell, his vaudeville partner. He was 29, she was 21. They got married in Erie, Pennsylvania. But things went downhill fast. By November 1934, they were done. In between, something messy happened. Hope met nightclub singer Dolores Reed during the run of Roberta. They hit it off quickly, too quickly. He started an affair with her while still married to Troxell. Publicly, Hope later claimed he married Dolores in February 1934, but the dates don't match up. He was still legally married to Grace at the time. If he did marry Dolores, then he was committing bigamy. There's no marriage certificate on file in Erie, just one for Grace. The rest? Mystery. Hope's team would later try to downplay the Troxell marriage, saying it never counted, but the documents say otherwise. By 1935, things were changing again. Hope landed his first regular radio gig on NBC's The Intimate Review. It wasn't a smash hit, but it put him on the radar. Then in 1938 he struck gold with the Pepsodent Show starring Bob Hope. It aired every Tuesday at 10 p.m. It exploded in popularity. Hope became a radio superstar. The show featured guest stars like Judy Garland and Desi Arnaz and introduced the world to the song, "Thanks for the Memory," which became Hope's theme. He didn't just entertain, he created a brand. Millions tuned in every week to hear his monologues, skits, and interviews. Radio made him a household name. Hope didn't do it alone. From the start, he knew good writing was everything. When Pepsodent launched, he paid 8 writers out of his own $2,500 weekly salary. He handpicked talents like Mel Shavelson, Norman Panama, and the Schwartz brothers. Eventually, the team grew to 15 writers. Every joke had to be tight, no longer than a line and a half, because Hope's pace was relentless. There's a famous story that on payday, he'd fold up the writers' checks into paper airplanes and toss them down to their desks. With a solid cast around him, the Pepsodent Show became the #1 radio program in America. By the early 1940s, it reached over 30 million listeners weekly. Jerry Colonna, with his wild mustache and over-the-top antics, became a fan favorite. Barbara Jo Allen, playing Vera Vague, brought her own flair. The show followed a simple format: Hope's monologue, a few sketches, some celebrity guests, then a wrap-up skit. It clicked with people. The chemistry was electric. The laughs were fast and constant. And Hope's delivery was flawless. The show helped define the golden age of radio and shaped the future of broadcast comedy. Bob Hope's first big moment in Hollywood came in 1938, when he starred in The Big Broadcast of 1938. It was a flashy musical comedy with a huge budget, over $1 million, which was massive back then. He played Buzz Fielding, a man juggling 3 ex-wives and a current girlfriend. But what really made this film special was a song. Thanks for the Memory, sung with Shirley Ross. It became an instant classic. The original line was supposed to be, "That weekend at Niagara when we never saw the falls," but the censors thought it was too suggestive. So it got watered down to, "When we hardly saw the falls." The lyricist, Leo Robin, hated the change. But the song still won the Oscar for Best Original Song. More importantly, it became Hope's signature tune. He ended almost every performance of his career with it, often changing the words to match the moment. The song's bittersweet tone matched Hope's romantic yet comical screen persona and gave audiences a sense of depth behind the jokes. 2 years later, in 1940, Road to Singapore hit theaters and marked the first of the legendary Road films that paired Bob Hope with Bing Crosby and Dorothy Lamour. The film was originally meant for different actors. Fred MacMurray and Jack Oakey turned it down, and even George Burns and Gracie Allen passed on it. Paramount took a gamble putting Hope and Crosby together, and it paid off. The plot followed 2 carefree playboys who run off to a fictional island called Kaigoon and meet a local woman played by Lamour. What made the film stand out was its unpredictable humor. Hope and Crosby would improvise lines and even speak directly to the audience, which was rare at the time. The chemistry between them was electric. When Road to Singapore premiered on March 13, 1940, it was a smash hit and became the 17th highest-grossing film of the year. In this first film, Hope was billed third behind Lamour, but after that, it was always Crosby first, Hope second, and Lamour third. The public loved the trio so much that the Road films kept coming for over 20 years. Between 1938 and 1972, Bob Hope appeared in 54 theatrical films. That's more than 1 movie per year for over 3 decades. From 1941 to 1953, he was consistently one of the top box office draws in America. His films combined comedy, romance, and music. Audiences especially loved the Road films, but even his solo comedies like My Favorite Brunette, 1947, The Paleface, 1948, and Sorrowful Jones, 1949, were hits. Hope's success on radio and television also helped keep him in the public eye. He hosted the Academy Awards 18 times between 1939 and 1977, still a record. Despite his fame, Hope was never nominated for a competitive Oscar. However, he did receive 4 honorary awards, including the Jean Hersholt Humanitarian Award in 1960. His film career ended with Cancel My Reservation in 1972, which flopped, but by then his place in Hollywood history was already secure. Behind the curtain, however, was a darker side. In Arthur Marx's 1993 biography The Secret Life of Bob Hope, there are allegations that Hope used his power to pressure young actresses into sexual favors. According to the book, he ran what was described as a casting couch operation from his Universal Studios office. Women who refused his advances were allegedly fired. These accusations, though denied by Hope's team, echo a broader pattern of abuse in Hollywood's golden era. Some insiders claimed Hope's behavior was an open secret, and the book even includes direct quotes and named witnesses. While critics said Marx had a personal grudge and was trying to sell a scandalous story, the details were specific and troubling. The biography also claims that Hope had a long string of affairs even while married. He allegedly arranged for women to be snuck into his hotel rooms during tours and paid for apartments near his home so he could visit them in secret. His longtime mistress, Marilyn Maxwell, was so well known within his circle that people nicknamed her Mrs. Hope. Hope supposedly bragged to an agent. Just make sure I get the best hotel suite, the best masser, and the best hooker in town. According to the book, Bing Crosby and Hope would sometimes trade girlfriends. The staff allegedly helped keep everything quiet, and his wife Dolores never left him, partly due to her Catholic beliefs. The stories, if true, reveal a double life, one as America's beloved entertainer, and one as a man who abused his status behind closed doors. On May 6, 1941, Hope did something no one expected from a film star. He performed a live show at March Field in California for military personnel. This was before the U.S. even entered World War II. It wasn't just a feel-good performance. It was broadcast nationally by NBC. That night launched what would become a 50-year relationship between Hope and the U.S. military. After Pearl Harbor, he made it his mission to bring comedy directly to the troops. Out of 144 broadcasts during World War II, only 9 were done from a studio. The rest were in military camps, on battlefronts, or near hospitals. He didn't just tell jokes, he tailored his humor to each location and even poked fun at the local officers. Soldiers loved it. His show became a piece of home for them. From 1941 to 1991, Hope completed 57 USO tours. He performed in every major U.S. conflict of the 20th century: World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Lebanon, and the Gulf War. He flew to the jungle, the desert, even the Indian Ocean island Diego Garcia, where the military built a runway just so he could land for a Christmas show in 1972. These weren't short stops. Hope would bring singers, dancers, and actors to entertain the troops for hours, often in sweltering heat or under threat of attack. He did 48 holiday shows overseas, always trying to lift spirits when morale was lowest. Veterans later said those shows helped them survive. His last tour came in December 1990 when he flew to Saudi Arabia and Bahrain during Operation Desert Shield. It was the end of an era. Hope didn't pay for those tours out of pocket. The U.S. Department of Defense, NBC, and his sponsors all funded them. But he was a smart businessman. His company, Hope Enterprises, kept ownership of all the footage. That gave him the rights to turn those tours into TV specials. These aired on NBC to huge ratings and earned him even more fame and money. Most entertainers donated their time for the USO without expecting anything in return. Hope turned his service into a media empire. He made money, yes, but he also made history. Still, according to Arthur Marks, those tours weren't just for patriotism. Bob Hope allegedly used his tours to continue his affairs away from home. His relationship with Marilyn Maxwell, who often joined the tours, was one of many. The book The Secret Life of Bob Hope claims that Hope used his time on the road to pursue women in his entourage and beyond. Maxwell was practically a co-star in his private life. The biography also says Hope's public comments were sometimes offensive. He reportedly made misogynistic jokes in a 1970 NBC special and even compared women to cows during the Miss World pageant that same year. Though these claims are disputed, they show a side of Hope that was far from family-friendly. Despite all this, Hope had strict rules about one thing: how to behave around wounded soldiers. He told every performer, "Never cry in front of the troops. They needed laughter, not pity." But even he broke that rule once. In 1943, while visiting a hospital in Italy, Hope met a soldier who had been in a coma for 2 months. When the soldier suddenly woke up and said, "Hey Bob Hope, when did you get here?" Hope couldn't hold back. He left the room in tears. Later, he returned and gave the man his Purple Heart medal. It was the only time he broke his own rule, and it showed just how deeply the experience affected him. But not everything about Bob Hope was bitterness. In 1977, something happened that brought out a very different side of him. That year, Anita Bryant launched her anti-gay campaign in Florida. She wanted to repeal laws that protected LGBTQ rights. She claimed gays were trying to recruit children. It was ugly, hateful stuff. Hope knew Bryant, they had performed together, but now his daughter Linda had come out as a lesbian. She was living with her partner. Suddenly it wasn't political, It was personal. And Hope didn't stay quiet. He started cracking jokes. They weren't mean, but they were sharp. "They're naming a street after Anita Bryant in Miami," he said. "Of course, it's one way." That line cut through the noise. It was simple but bold. At a time when most celebrities were afraid to say anything, Hope stood up. The backlash came fast. Conservative groups were furious. They flooded Texaco, Hope's only sponsor, with complaints. Texaco begged him to stop. "It's a very touchy subject," they warned. Bryant even bragged about it in her memoir. This was one of the first organized boycotts by the religious right. Hope told Larry King, "I've never seen anything like this." But he didn't back down entirely. He believed in the joke. More importantly, he believed in his daughter. Then came February 1986. The AIDS crisis was exploding. People were scared, and the government wasn't doing much. Elizabeth Taylor had already stepped up. She was leading the fight for AIDS research. That month, she hosted a huge fundraiser in Scottsdale, Arizona. Bob Hope joined her. The event raised $800,000, an enormous amount at the time. It featured auctions, Arabian horses, and big stars like George Hamilton. Hope's presence gave the cause mainstream attention. It was risky. Most public figures stayed away from AIDS events. Not Hope. He showed up, made people laugh, and helped shift the public conversation. But just a few months later, he made one of the biggest mistakes of his career. On July 4, 1986, at a swanky Statue of Liberty celebration, Hope was on a yacht performing for a room full of high rollers, $1,008 plate guests. Then came the joke. "The Statue of Liberty has AIDS. They don't know if she got it from the mouth of the Hudson or the Staten Island ferry." The room went quiet. People were shocked, groans, embarrassed laughter. The press didn't hold back. They called the joke tasteless, abusive, and morally crude. Hope had gone too far. He later apologized, but the damage was done. The remark became a symbol of ignorance at a time when compassion was desperately needed. In 1989, he made another misstep during a TV appearance. He used the word fag. It was a careless moment. But GLAAD came down hard. They wanted an apology. This time, Hope didn't just say sorry. He filmed a public service announcement on his own dime. He told people to stop using hate speech. It was simple, honest, and it mattered. In a time when most stars would have played dumb or doubled down, Hope admitted he was wrong. Even GLAAD was surprised. "We can't even get progressive artists to do that," said one of their directors. It showed that despite his flaws, Hope was still willing to grow. That growth didn't save his film career, though. His last starring movie, Cancel My Reservation, came out in 1972. It was a disaster. Critics hated it. Audiences stayed away. The plot was a mess, part Western, part comedy, part murder mystery. It was based on a Louis L'Amour novel but ended up being pure slapstick. The premiere at Radio City Music Hall should have been a big event, but a musician's strike meant no orchestra, no rockets, just the movie. And only 300 people showed up in the biggest theater in the world. Hope was nearly 70. His jokes felt old. The cameos, John Wayne, Johnny Carson, Bing Crosby, felt desperate. He realized it was time. Not because of the reviews, but because he no longer fit the times. After more than 50 films, he quietly stepped away from movies. Bob Hope lived to be 100 years old. That alone is remarkable, but what made it even more special was how the world celebrated him. On May 29, 2003, the day he turned 100, Los Angeles renamed the famous intersection of Hollywood and Vine to Bob Hope Square. 35 states officially called it Bob Hope Day. Even at that age, Hope kept joking. "I'm so old," he said. "They've canceled my blood type." But behind the humor, his health had been getting worse. In June 2000, he was hospitalized for gastrointestinal bleeding. In August 2001, it was pneumonia. Still, he held on. Then, on the morning of July 27, 2003, he passed away peacefully at his home in Toluca Lake, California. Pneumonia finally took him. He left behind more than memories. He left behind a legacy. He was one of the most loved entertainers of the 20th century. Even in his final moments, his wit didn't leave him. When asked where he wanted to be buried, he told his wife Dolores, "Surprise me." At first, his remains were placed in a mausoleum vault at the San Fernando Mission Cemetery. Later, they were moved to the newly built Bob Hope Memorial Garden next door. Cartoonists around the world drew tributes. Many showed him being welcomed into heaven by Bing Crosby, his longtime friend. But if you really want to understand Bob Hope, you have to look inside a room most people never saw. It wasn't just a vault, it was a walk-in fireproof room next to his home office. Rows of filing cabinets lined the walls. This was where he stored the secret to his comedy empire. One cabinet held joke sheets, typewritten pages from his writers. Some had Hope's own notes scribbled on them, things like, "Pause for laugh," or, "Emphasize Congress." Another section had a system of indexes. Over 300 topics were organized alphabetically, from air travel to zoo animals. That way, if he had to perform for, say, a group of pilots, he could pull out every joke he had on flying. He even kept jokes that didn't work. Some were too risky. Some just felt outdated. But he saved them anyway, and sometimes they came back to life. A line he first wrote in 1966. "3 of my stocks went off the financial page into the help wanted section." Flopped. But in 1987, when Black Monday hit, the same joke killed. He also kept personal letters. Fans wrote to him. Soldiers wrote from war zones. Politicians sent notes. There were even handwritten letters from U.S. presidents. One drawer held drafts from his USO shows during the Vietnam War. His team tailored jokes to fit local scenes. One line joked, "Saigon's traffic makes Rome look like a parking lot." It made tired troops laugh, even for a minute. Hope's system was so organized that even the Library of Congress took notice. In 2000, they digitized his files and turned them into an exhibit. It wasn't just about the jokes, it was about how they were made. Hope tested every line. He'd tell a joke on stage, see how it landed, and tweak it for the next crowd. One 1953 transcript shows how a golf joke flopped in Cleveland but got big laughs in Chicago. He changed it based on that. He didn't work alone either. The vault proved that. He had over 100 writers. They often argued over who came up with which line. One 1944 memo shows a dispute over a roast of Bing Crosby. It wasn't a one-man act, it was a comedy factory. And strangely, the more time passed, the more his older jokes came back. A 1970 bit about airport security. "They'll let you fly but won't say where," seemed silly back then. After September 11th, it hit differently. Modern comedians like John Mulaney and Hassan Minhaj have studied Hope's system. They were impressed not just by the jokes but by the process. The vault was like a primitive version of today's algorithm-driven writing rooms. Still, some myths grew around that vault. Some said it held scandalous material. It didn't. The most controversial parts were political jokes, like a 1968 line about Lyndon B. Johnson. "He's so unpopular, even his library card expired." But these were often softened for TV to avoid offending anyone. One folder from the 1950s labeled "Risque" had jokes that barely raised eyebrows today. One read, "I told my wife to dress sexy, she wore a toaster around her neck." Some letters criticized him. Soldiers from Vietnam said he made the war seem too light. Those letters changed future scripts. Hope listened.